Kia ora everybody and welcome to the Good Day Matrix. My name is Daz and I have the privilege of being here today at Creative Waikato with the CEO, Jeremey. He is a composer, he's an artist, he's a performer, he's a producer and he's a published author. Collaboration is at the forefront of everything that Jeremey does, and he gets strength and inspiration from the magic that happens when different art forms come together to be creative and just see what happens. In his spare time, he is also the CEO of Creative Waikato, where he gets to work to build capacity in this area and is an advocate for the arts. So thank you so much for your time today, Jeremey.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm very excited, and I feel like it's just something that so many people need to understand more about, that you don't have to necessarily be amazing in the arts, but if it's something that brings you joy, then give it a try and get involved.
Totally. It's as much about a celebration of process and practice as it is about what the result is. So like just the kind of act of doing the thing, whether it's singing or dancing, drawing, writing, pottery, needlecraft, kind of whatever you kind of want, whatever resonates with you, that's the kind of key thing. And we've sometimes it can be seen as kind of frivolous, or it needs to be seen as a like side hustle. It's like, oh, you're really good at painting, you should sell them or whatever. It's like, actually, like the value is in just doing it, because sometimes if you have to sell it, it will kind of remove some of the joy from it. It becomes a task.
And then there's pressure on it too, instead of it being something that's beautiful, that's just naturally created. So at the Good Day Matrix, we obviously have 5 pillars, and we talk about body, mind, identity, community, and environment. And so we'll go through those today, but obviously we're weaving the arts right throughout this conversation, so I'm really excited. But for body, is there any rituals or daily things that you do, or just how do you take care of your body?
Arguably, it probably like flicks around the place a bit. I do enjoy going for walks. Probably not as often as I should, but like when I do get out, and particularly going out for bushwalks and stuff, being out in nature is really rewarding, and being able to kind of listen to the sounds around me. But I live in town, so it means that I can kind of walk everywhere, and that's really good. The other kind of key things for me is like in performing is it's a really kind of beautiful ritual, and like quite a physical thing. I'm a pianist mainly, and so there is it's a lot of sitting around, but it's also like it's a whole body kind of thing, with the way that you kind of move and the way that you can kind of emote through the instrument. So that becomes a really kind of useful tool for that. I have dabbled with yoga, but am not particularly kind of well practiced at it, and like so beginner and not very flexible. It's probably something that I need to work on. But yeah, it's very kind of variable, and I think that's kind of the nature of being in a kind of performance lifestyle. It's like sometimes the hours make sense and sometimes they don't, and they kind of flick and change, and so it's constantly in flux, which is what makes it interesting.
We literally saw you scootering to work today, so I think you're doing pretty well. Most of us turn up on our cars. But it's true, my mum is a pianist, and she's an amazing pianist, and I used to, when I was a kid, not understand, because she'd like, her whole body would move with the piano and her hand would flick, and I was more so thought it was like other, when you see them on TV, they're very square, and then I was like, why don't you do that? But she was feeling it. She was into the beauty of what she was creating. It's so cool.
There's a really fascinating TED talk with a pianist, and I'm not going to remember his name, but he talks about the kind of process of learning piano, and he calls it one cheek playing. So it talks about when you're first learning, you kind of sit on both butt cheeks and you play, and you're very static. But he says, like, the more expressive you get, the more you play on one cheek or the other, and so you kind of flow around. So like, that's something that always kind of sticks in mind, as you kind of like flying around. It's like, oh, it's this one cheek playing.
That is going to be a quote of my day. I love that. Elton John took it to the next level of like being on one toe and going through it. Oh, that's so fantastic. So when you're in those busy times, because we all have that, right? Where, and particularly with performing, if you're performing in the evenings, you've gone right through the day with rehearsals and stuff. How do you put things into play on a tough day? So if you know that it's going to be a really long, tough day, is there anything that you do or any strategies you've set up to make sure you take care of yourself within that?
Finding kind of moments of quiet. I had quite a proactive meditation practice for a good while. I started when I was doing my PhD, and I signed on to do the PhD, and the PhD was in creative practice, so I was in writing music, and I had the worst writer's block that I've ever had in my life. And I think partly it was to do with the kind of stresses that I'd placed on that thing being a thing. But also I probably was a bit burnt out from like work beforehand, and went through this process of I've just signed up to do this thing that I have to write music and I can't write, and I just had nothing to say, and went through a bunch of different kind of processes and studied some meditation, and kind of found that was really kind of a really powerful way of kind of making sense of stuff. Then had a kid, and the kind of regular meditation practice kind of
regular programming got disrupted.
It went out the window. But having those skills in the kind of toolkit, it meant that you can kind of get into similar states through some calm breath and through kind of moments of quiet, and sometimes for me that's even like a game of Tetris is a really powerful kind of just kind of focuser. And it's just you can kind of turn off the rest of the world and just be like, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and do this thing.
And just narrow the focus right down.
And that becomes really rewarding. But then also the actual playing of the piano is a profound thing. So even if the day's been stressful, kind of get into the zone and you're ready to perform, and there's kind of the moment of quiet before you go on stage, and then start playing, and more and more you kind of enter into the flow state, and that is the refresh, and that's the kind of the joy, and that's the kind of escape, but it's also the focus. And when a lot of the playing that I do is improvisational, and if I think about it, it stops. So as soon as I'm like, oh, I'll do that thing, my fingers go, it's like,
no.
It's like, don't tell me what to do. I'm just doing the thing. Just get out of your head. And so that's a really useful reminder to just kind of to be listening mostly. And so it's like listening to what I'm doing, but listening to what the people around me are doing and responding to that. So it's and having that trust that the body knows what it's supposed to be doing. And so you don't have to kind of think this finger goes here and this finger goes here. It just kind of like play and it flows, and you can kind of respond in that space. So for me, having times when I know like there's always a piano around that I can go and sit at and like, okay, I'm just going to work through some things here.
And your child must love that too.
And we make a lot of music together, and that's super fun as well.
The music totally missed my generation. So my mum is amazing, and I am like a brick trying to play the piano. She even got me a piano teacher when I was young, and she was like, I'd love her to follow in my footsteps, but I don't have the patience to teach her because I was, and she rang my mum one day and she goes, Raymond, she doesn't have the fingers for it, and she just doesn't have the talent for it. And I can still play the Come On Be Faithful. It's the only one I went but that's how the effort I put into it, because I was a sporty kid. And all my friends at the time I had to do my piano lesson were having lunch and running around on the field right beside where I could hear them. So I'm like, she'd be like, that's not, sorry, because you can hear your mates. And so I think I would love to be.
Well, it's never too late.
I know. I keep saying I need to try the guitar, and then I stupidly block myself and go, a bit too old, blah, 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 and a bit too hard. But yes, you're going to be my inspiration, Jeremy.
And I think that's a thing. There's a whole generation of people who unfortunately have gone through schooling where it wasn't prioritized, and if you weren't particularly good at something, you were kind of told that you couldn't.
Yeah, that's the key bit.
The trauma of that is profound in terms of how it's affected people, and that's music, that's drawing, that's acting, dancing, kind of whatever.
Everything.
And because there was this kind of expectation that it had to be for something, like you had to perform it.
Well, even like I said, I was a sporty kid, and that's what the block you get put into, right? And so then friends, when we did like cross country at school, they'd be like, well, I'm not good at running. So they immediately dropped off that radar, and later in life, like, well, I don't really exercise because I never really have. So it's the same thing, isn't it, for me, is it's not going, well, I've never played an instrument yet.
Yeah, totally.
I love that. So around Mind, do you have any like key support people that sort of are there in those moments when you need some support, who know what you need and just come in to support?
There's lots of different people. My wife is a really profound supporter of me. Also, will call bullshit on stuff. Yeah, I'll get her to listen to a piece of music that I've been working on, and I can see what you're doing. I don't really like it, but I'm like, okay, yeah, keep me humble. That's cool. But no, she's really a great supporter. My parents have always been really strong supporters of the work that I do. But there's a bunch of kind of mentors and colleagues and collaborators who, I think that's the joy of collaborating, is you kind of share the load of the thing, and which makes it fun.
Yeah.
And it means that there are like the moments of, like, there's definitely kind of moments of stress and frustration, but usually they're coming from outside rather than from within.
Gotcha.
And so
what's it like when you're doing a collab? This is totally off topic, but this is where this is what happens to me. So what's it like when you're doing a collab and that moment happens, and you see it in movies, but I've obviously not been in the creative space to see it, but when all those moving parts come together and the synergy happens and the magic happens, what is that? Can you put words to what that moment where you're just like,
it's really hard to describe. Time kind of stands still.
Yeah.
And there's an energy that you can feel, that's tangible, that's, I think, probably what some people might term kind of spiritual or kind of magical, or this thing where everything is resonating in sympathy with one another, that the kind of the vibration and the resonance of that affects you, and it affects your body and your mind, and it happens in so many different spaces, but it is really kind of magical when you kind of have this thing where just everything, like the conversation is flowing. And I think that, like, a lot of the way that I think about art making and collaboration is conversation. Like, everything is kind of coming from stories, and whether those stories are verbal or whether they are expressive in some other means, the conversation is happening between the people involved, and everyone will have that thing where you're sitting down with a really good friend, and the conversation flows, and it's like been 8 hours.
I was going to say,
like,
8 hours later. Oh shit, it's better going to
the kids. Put the kids to bed or do something. And I think that's probably the easiest way to explain it.
Yeah. Which still wouldn't even, be the, not even close, but sort of,
And I mean, I think that's the real beauty of it, is that when you've had the experience, you know what it is. And any attempt to describe it in words can't. And it's the same if you talk about an artwork, if you talk about a piece of music. You can use all of the analytical language and kind of techniques and stuff that you can, and it's never going to be the experience of listening to that thing.
Just a feeling you can't put words to. That's so cool though. And magical to be, I'd love to sit in a room where that moment happens and you see everyone do that. It would just be an out of body experience to watch everybody just that synergy happen, and then almost like a firework, just yeah.
And you see it on people's faces,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's just sort of like a quick glance to someone who you're jamming with, or it's a kind of sense of release, or it's a sense of kind of heightened energy or something, and it is tangible.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
So we'll move into identity. So we believe really strongly that it's really important to know where you've come from and how much that actually influences who you are and how you make decisions and how you react to situations, and obviously people carry trauma and stuff as well, but it's just being able to unpack that and know why you love a certain thing or where that's come through from generations. So tell us about where you're from. We obviously know you hail from the Waikato, but tell us about where you're from. Tell us about your whānau.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Kirikiroa. I sort of go away and come back and go away and come back, and spent some time overseas and spent a couple of years in Dunedin and then come back. And I'm one of 6 kids.
Wow.
And my parents are still together and are really kind of encouraging and supportive. They have been married, must be nearly 40 years now.
Wow.
And yes, I'm the eldest. I have 1 brother and 4 sisters, and we were always really kind of encouraged to do the things that were interesting to us. And I think that I was always a weird kid, but that was always a good thing.
I was going to say, please say it's good, yes.
Yeah.
That's what I talk to my kids about.
And have always, and my dad is one who is a doer. Like he like has an idea and like he sees that idea through. And my mum is really kind of caring and expressive. She was a piano player as well. And so between them, there was always a kind of a nurturing sense. And so I think that sense of care probably comes from there. Also a sense of drive to kind of do things. And I know that have an idea and kind of see it through that my dad has, that's definitely something that I have. And I know there's people who will sit and talk about, oh, what if we did this? What if we did this? I'll find a way to do it. And whether that's weird musical combinations of things, or thinking, oh, it'd be really interesting if I could make a piece of music that sat alongside a cocktail. So when you drink the cocktail and you listen to the music, it changes the way it tastes. So I'll find a way to do that. So work with a friend of mine and create this kind of experience, or do some work with some neuroscientists, or do some work with sensory scientists, and be like, well, what is the? I mean, because I think that's the thing we like. You talk about we're all the kind of combination of the things that have led us to this point, and that's where we go, where we come from, and our whānau, but it's all the things that we've watched and listened to and read and experienced. And there's something really kind of interestingly unique about everything, but there's something also kind of, there's elements of universality. And so it's like, what are the ways that I can explore this kind of interconnected multi-sensory experience that we all have, but express something new through it? And so I think that's one of the really kind of fascinating realizations, is that at all times we are having a complete multi-sensory experience, but we tend to privilege one sense over another. So we're primarily visual creatures, and so that becomes a kind of dominant sense. And because of that, we're good at pattern recognition, and we're good at kind of understanding color and shape and form. And then the next kind of level is our oral kind of ability, and our ability to kind of understand tone, and that's how we communicate and we tell stories, and we do all of these other things. But then there's the senses of like touch and smell and taste that are really profound at particular points in life. Like you go and sit down and have a really good cup of coffee. That's this kind of amazing holistic experience where you have a really good meal, or you kind of doing these things. But it's really fascinating to think about, like, what are those experiences like outside of those kind of targeted times? And so even as we're sitting here, we're hearing all of these other sounds around us, we're filtering them out, we're focusing on this conversation, we're seeing one another, but we've got the experience of touching the surfaces that we're sitting on and smelling the room around us and probably tasting what we had for breakfast and kind of all of these things that alter the way that you perceive the situation that you're in.
Yeah.
And so as an artist, it's really fascinating to think about how can I create experiences that become all-encompassing because the kind of layers of experience have been thought about. And so that I think all of those kind of ideas, like coming from what resonates with me and putting that out as an offering, it sort of informs the way that I work. And I think my background in terms of like how I am, the way I am, it's kind of fascinating because there's like things like the first music that really resonated with me and was really like, this is the thing that I want to listen to. This is 12, 13, it was like American blues music.
Darn, I was hoping to go boy bands.
and so it's like everyone else was listening to like metal and punk and things, and I was just really fascinated by early blues recordings and kind of went on this rabbit hole of that and found jazz and found funk and things through like that, which is not something that, there was not music that my parents listened to. It was not music that I was really like exposed to. It was just, I found a CD somewhere. It's like, what is this thing? And I need to experience this thing. And, so for a kind of middle class white kid in Hamilton to kind of find this resonance overseas was really profound. And I think then through that, different kind of opportunities to work with different people have informed the way that I think. So through university study, getting to spend time with Dr. Richard Nuns, who is a kind of expert in taonga kōrero, and worked with Hirani Melbourne and Brian Flintoff, and I was lucky enough to do some courses with him and get to perform with him and do some projects with him. And his kind of approach to thinking about kind of sound and the interactions of the natural world and where it kind of intersects with expression was really kind of profound. And then through him met Horo Horo, who I've worked with for the last 15 years on projects. And so it's kind of all of those things that are these kind of like chance encounters and like, hey, would you like to do this thing? And I mean, when I met Horo, we were doing a show with Richard, and he's, I've got this guy that I've been working with, can he come in and be part of the show? I'm like, yeah, totally. And met him for the first time. I'm like, hey bro, like really nice to meet you. Really want you to play, but I'm going to put you outside of the concert hall. We're going to set you up with a mic next to the lake, and we'll give you headphones so you can hear what's going on stage, but no one will see you, and you'll play with the environment, and we'll bring that into the thing. And he's like, cool, yeah, I want to work with this guy.
Wow.
And it's like, we'd never really met, but he was just like fully on board with the weirdness, and we've been working together ever since.
So around community, when we caught up a while ago, you talked about people having access to meaningful experiences with the arts. So tell us about the communities that you're a part of and how they're facilitating those kinds of experiences and how they've both affected you, but also how they're affecting the community that are a part of it.
So, I mean, I think we're all part of so many different communities, and I think one of the things that I'm lucky to have in the role at Creative Waikato is serving as an advisor and kind of strategic helper to arts organisations and creatives around the Waikato region. And so that means that we can kind of work alongside people in their communities and see the tangible impact that having accessible creative practice means for people, and understanding that affects us at so many different levels. So, I mean, for me, that's always been a part of like being in different communities, being in local theatre and kind of the community that surrounds that, being in local orchestras and local bands and playing music with people at school, and then like finding a new community of people at university and the kind of expression around there, finding communities in people who are making film, and there's a really kind of beautiful little short film community that's here, and those are people that I met through university who wasn't studying with, but just kind of met at things, and you go to shows and you meet people and you talk, and so all of that again kind of informs the nature of kind of who I am, but also a big part of our mission is in acknowledging that for a lot of people, like their kind of pathway to creative practice has been removed. So unless if you're lucky enough to have a whānau that encouraged it, or you were predisposed to it and you went through it at school, or you stumbled across it somewhere, it's often seems like a thing that sits over there, but there's a range of different things that can be so beneficial to people's well-being. The trick is finding the one that connects with you. And I think that's the challenge, is that art, culture, creativity is so broad. It's so many different things, and there's so many different genres and subgenres and styles and layers within the thing, that you can't just experience one thing and be like, oh no, I don't like art. It's like, no, you just don't like that one. But there's this one and this one and this one, and part of the joy of having kind of communities who are presenting a range of different things is that hopefully it encourages people to try a bunch of different things, because
that's the ticket.
I think one of the key realizations for me was that not all art is for everyone, but there is art for everyone. And so it's about finding the thing that sparks that moment of joy for you, and it is a journey, and it will take time, and there'll be probably a bunch of stuff that you're like, oh no, I didn't like that. But as long as we can kind of persevere to find the new things, the joy that can bring, the sense of kind of calm, the sense of kind of mindfulness, and kind of all of these other things that can be experienced through that. And I mean, I have a really kind of untested theory, but an idea where I think there's some element of the increase of anxiety and mental health issues that sits alongside the decrease in community singing. And I think that in previous generations there were more pathways for community singing, whether that was through church groups or social clubs or community hall dances and things, and you go and listen to music, and that kind of tangible real world experience was what you did, because there wasn't 700 things available on like Netflix and the internet in 1 minute. And so we would be a part of creative activity without kind of really thinking about it being that. And then there's been kind of less and less of that, and more.
And we were talking about this a while ago about, so when you're a kid you try everything. So at school everything's multidisciplinary. So you're doing a bit of sport, you're doing a bit of arts, you are doing maths, you're doing science, you're doing all of the stuff. And then the older we get, the more we specialise and narrow the path. And then when you describe yourself to someone, say, oh, hey, Jeremy, what do you do? I'm an accountant. Full stop. And you're like, oh, and so we almost were told at one point, you can only be one thing. You can't be an accountant and a painter. You can't do all of these things. It's not, you need to specialise. You need to do it.
When you become your job as well,
exactly.
which is just kind of ludicrous.
And so now it's I'm 37. So now it's like the unlearning of that, to go, it's okay to go and try it, because I've always been, well, if I'm not good at it, I don't try it, or if I don't do it anymore. So how and this is, could be another hour conversation there, but like that's what we need to start working on. That's what we're trying to do, is inspire curiosity to try. And that's what you said, like there's no harm in trying. There's no judgment in turning up and giving guitar a nudge for a term, and but commit to that term, and don't just go for the first day, which is
relish being an amateur. Because we just expect this like, oh, I love Jimi Hendrix, so I'll pick up a guitar. Oh, I can't play like him.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I must be not be any good. So he didn't pick it up and play it that way the first time. And if it's joyful, if that challenge and that process is joyful, even if you're never a professional guitarist, that's meaningful and that's valuable and that's so vital. And I think that the hyper productivity, hyper commodification of things in modern society has a lot to answer for in terms of like being able to enjoy a thing just because it's fun.
Well, it's even wellness.
Yeah.
Like everything now is wellness comes at a price, and it's not that at all. Again, it's another myth we're debunking.
Yeah.
You should in Garden Place here do like a try it out day where like you have all these different art forms in one place, and people, I don't know, if they could take 20 at each, and they book a time, and there's no pressure, just come.
Yeah, just come.
Come.
Totally.
Yeah, and just and particularly aiming at my generation who avoid new things and go, there's no harm in, wear old clothes, you're going to probably get some clay here and some paint in your room. Just come, got the most perfect space for it.
It's the joy of play.
Yeah.
And play is seen as silly and frivolous and naive, and kids know how to do it.
Yeah.
Kids are amazing at it. And we don't allow time for it and we don't see it as being important, but it's profoundly important for wellness, for creative thought, for curiosity, for kind of all of these things. And if it's building Lego, or it's having a fun dance with your kids, or it's drawing, just doodling on a page, it really doesn't matter.
You've led us beautifully into environment, because when we talk about environment, it could be physical, it can be work, it can be sustainability, it can be all these things. But when you and I caught up, you talked about the value you place on your time. So this has literally brought us in here. So talk to us about, and I mean, your Creative Waikato team would be the first probably to come in here and be like, this is what it feels like when you work here. But how do you show people where to put value in the time that they use, and how do you do it yourself as well? But because that's creating an amazing environment around you. If you're saying, I value you going out and trying something new, or I value myself going out and just taking space and seeing what happens, the ripple effect of that in your ecosystem inspires somebody else to do the same. So what's that? How do you do that?
How do I, I mean, part of it is having a kid is a really kind of useful pathway into play. And part of there's a range of activities that we do, but one of the activities that we do is we make music together. And that is all comes from play. And so there might be a kind of weird, silly conversation, or there might be something that sparks an idea, and then that will become a song, and we'll go into the studio and we'll record it. And so now he's 10 and he has 3 albums on Spotify of really like hilariously catchy tunes that all have come from play, and they're the kind of result of this thing. And it's not the fact that there's like these songs, but like the process of doing them is just so joyful, and that's really rewarding. And there are certainly times where that slips away, but it's a really useful reminder to kind of go back and to do those things. Part of what we do at Creative Waikato is part of everyone's personal professional development program is creative practice is a part of that. And so it's sort of like what are the kind of things that you are doing, and what are the things that you want to try. And fortunately, I mean, it's a team of artists, and so they all have different creative practice and different things. And we've got people who are dancers and theatre makers and painters and people working with like kind of stitching and needlework, poets, and so there's a real kind of richness in that. And it can be hard when you've got to kind of balance the joy of doing that and the time to do that, plus the contracts and the kind of services and the impact that you want to have. But a lot of the time that work is also kind of connected with creativity, and it's kind of inspiring those opportunities for other people, and that's different but also rewarding. But yeah, the pursuit of time as a kind of fascinating one, and I have been reflecting on it a lot recently around the kind of increase in technology and the increase in like automation and kind of all of these things was kind of designed to allow us to have more time. But somewhere along the line, we just became more busy.
Filled the space.
Yeah, and so it's like, rather than like embracing the fact that we can have more time and we can afford to be slightly less productive, the kind of hyper capitalism of it all has encouraged us to fill every gap and to constantly be available, and that's hard. I mean, like, I'm always like contactable, and a part of that comes from also a long time being spent as a freelance artist, where it's like, like when the phone rings, you pick it up, because that's how you pay the mortgage, and that's how you keep your family fed. And so that's a really hard habit to break, but one that I'm trying to be mindful of. And I think the other kind of habit is, hey, how are you? I'm busy. And I do it all the time, and I get really annoyed at myself every time I say it, because it's like, that's not an interesting answer.
And it's not a feel. You've heard me say this almost every interview. It's like, there's that closed question we ask: how are you? Good. Busy, but good. Almost every person will say it to you, and so you're like, oh, okay then. And so they hear busy, and they immediately go, well, we better leave him alone, because Jeremy's flat out like, we should just leave him alone. So it's like this blocker, and we've talked about it, like, we probably don't mean that to be a blocker, and we do have time for that person, but we just close it out, like, and they're like, oh, okay, we'll have a great day. And actually, good is not actually a feeling either. So like, it's how we communicate these things to say, I might be feeling a bit overwhelmed at the moment, or I've got a lot on my plate, but let's go have a coffee. Or, how we try and reshape that is so important. And it, again, brings us to portion distortion, which is our last part that we talk about. And it's all about time. And it seems to not matter what age or stage you are in life, our management of time is just constantly a battle. Whether you're a stay-at-home mum, whether you're in corporate, whether you're a truck driver, like, we're just pushing it every which way, and we're sliding into doors going, sorry, I'm 5 minutes late, but this happened. And so, are there any like current challenges that you're facing around time, or have previously faced?
Like, the calendar is always like fully booked with things, and I mean, part of that is certainly my own doing, but also I think part of that comes from like having a really deep care about the work that I'm doing, and I think also there's this like idea of work-life balance being this kind of this or that thing, and it's just not that. It's like this pie that's constantly kind of shifting and moving, and I get a lot of joy out of the work that I do, and so there is a kind of fine line that you kind of tread with that, and sometimes it's more and sometimes it's less. But I'm really trying to think about how I can answer that question. I don't have a really good answer now, because like often it takes more time to explain what the actual situation is. So good is like, I'm good. But I think that also comes back to how we introduce ourselves. It's like, oh, hey, I'm Jeremey, I'm the CEO of Creative Waikato. It's like, well, I'm that, but I'm an artist, and I'm a composer, and I'm a dad, and I'm an amateur baker, and I'm a lapsed bushwalker, and I'm kind of all of these things, and that's what makes life interesting. And that's,
I agree.
And so potentially it's even, how do we ask like the question better? So like, rather than how I use, like, what's one interesting thing that you've done in the last 5 days? We're literally peddling, saying, how are you feeling today, or what's been going on for you lately? Like just changing, but it's just honestly, and I struggle with it too. I go, how are you? Darn, I know not to say that, because I know what's going to come back. So but when you're so I'm really trying for myself to get that mind shift to change, to try and get those, because the conversation's different
It's so different the minute, and they're expecting you to say, how are you? So they're already like mouthing, oh, she didn't say that. So I've been, we've had a couple of projects on at work, and all of a sudden this pivot changes because what's been happening for you is so much different. But yeah, it's so funny. And people, when they say, how are you? They're already walking past you and you're like, good.
Yeah. It's becoming like a greeting rather than an actual question.
Absolutely. Even when you're walking along the street and you just like, how are you?
Yeah.
And that's, hi, don't really care about the answer, but how are you? Do you have any actions and strategies that you put in place to make sure that you do feel joy every day?
Not specifically, but I have an innate curiosity that I think guides the pursuit of joy.
Nice.
And that, so it's not something that I'm like, oh, it's 9:05, I better find a joyful thing. It comes from conversation. It comes from like seeing a really interesting article and reading that, or it comes from celebrating little moments at home. Sometimes it comes from like just getting somewhere early and sitting down and being quiet and having the cup of coffee by myself and kind of enjoying that.
Yeah. So it's almost like you have a strategy of paying attention.
Trying to. Yeah.
Yeah, and taking that mindful moment to go, what's going on here?
And drawing that from my creative practice, so drawing that from my improvisational practice, that kind of reminder of if I'm playing, I need to be present.
Yeah.
And I need to be in the space, because if I'm not present, it doesn't work. And there's always something buzzing in a pocket or something, but it's actually trying to be, okay, I'm here with you, and we're talking about this thing, and I'm listening, and I've been blessed with a reasonably good memory, and that like I can have a conversation and not need to be, I need to note that down. I need to note that down.
I'm a noter.
I can try and be more here and kind of having this discussion and trying to listen, trying not to be distracted by other things, and trying to hold that space in a way that is not just waiting for a turn to talk.
Did you feel with our shift now to Zoom and Teams and Google Meets and online meetings, I would find myself in meetings and I'll look down the barrel for this. So I'm talking and I'm honestly on the mind like, blah, 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 it's really, really exciting. And the person's sitting there and they don't realize what they're giving back to me, which is, I suppose it's fine. And that kind of being in the moment and paying attention, and then you'll see their eyes tracks, that a message has come up or they're looking down to the text, and it doesn't happen too often for me, but it happens enough that so I've actually started trying to talk to people about it, going, even if you're on a meeting of 10 or 8 people or whatever, like be engaged, sit forward and put your eyes into the barrel of the camera, or like look at the person at least on the screen that's talking, because that matters. Otherwise, the more disengaged it's all going to feel. You're like, well, what was even the point of being there if I didn't feel like anyone was listening? So it's how we make sure that our in-person kōrero, if we can't do it in person, we do it online, that we really give this, we deliver energy.
And it's
across.
hard because we get a lot in communication from the stuff that happens outside of the screen.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot around the kind of Zoom fatigue, around us attempting to find those cues, but not being able to read them.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a much more kind of tiring experience. I found the transition to Zoom relatively easy because prior to this work, I was working as a researcher and postgraduate supervisor with students all around the country. So I was teaching on Zoom anyway. And so it was like, we're going to pivot to Zoom. Like, okay.
Yeah. Just tell me the time.
We've been doing this for the last couple of years. That's cool, and it's got better and better, and the quality's better. And but it is a challenge, and it's a challenge because you're on the thing that has all the distractions, and it has your emails, and it has all like Facebook, and it has all that stuff there, and sometimes if you're in a group meeting, It's like, yeah, this person's talking for way too
There
long.
we go.
I'm gonna do this other thing because
Yeah.
at least this is a productive use of my time.
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah, and that, yeah, I've got a good measure for that. Yeah, absolutely. Particularly those ones where like, and everyone's sharing. You're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And not sharing personal stuff, but it's like, so what have you been up to for the last month for your work? And they're like, oh, so I've contacted this person. Oh, I don't need to know.
Yeah. So this is great, but
then
thank
that
you.
comes into, and that's what I'm working with a couple of organisations about at the moment, is valuing your people's time. So if you're going to bring them in for a meeting, what's the purpose?
Yeah.
And so you're not just doing the fill-in and just doing the, well, we have a meeting every week. This is what we do. This is how we connect. Well,
And
how are you
sometimes
connecting?
sometimes there is some value in that whakawhanaungatanga
Oh,
and kind of knowing on,
absolutely.
but it's
But
like
then
how
make
you
that
ask the
purpose.
questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And make that the purpose, because we want to know how people are going, and I think it's more and more important. But it's not going, okay, so it's just a weekly meeting, we'll just do a quick round, and you can already tell people are like, oh, she doesn't really care. So you're like, kids have been sick, but I'm all good, you know. And the next one goes, oh, I'm just been knee deep in work. Next one. Whereas if it's, you've got 3 minutes every week where it's yours to speak about. So you might be like, my mum's been really sick, so we've had a couple of hospital visits, and it's not for someone to comment on, it's just for someone to hear and understand where that person's sitting in that moment. And you might follow up afterwards and just go, hey, I'm really sorry that's going on. Do you need some help? Can we take some of that work off you? But yeah, whakawhanaungatanga is a really, really big one for us. But yeah, it's just purpose. It's not having meetings for the sake of meetings and then doing a measure and going, could this be online? Do I need to make everybody come in to hear, you know?
Well, and even like just like ask a weird question.
Yeah.
And they're like, man, like, what's your favorite song at the moment?
Oh, yes.
Or there's some really hilarious questions. Like, if you had to describe the color yellow to someone who's blind,
Wow.
how would you do it?
Yeah.
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah. That is a fascinating. You'd say warm. Because I'm like bright more than it.
Yeah.
It's not the right way either. That's really cool. I love
So
it.
it's like, it doesn't always have to be
Yeah.
the other.
The stock standard.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic. I have loved it. I've got some quick fire questions for you.
Yes.
All right. 3 things that made you smile today.
A scooter to work. I love a scooter to work. It's like really kind of fun and rewarding. A picture that my son drew, which he's been doing these kind of photo collages. We're taking photos of the real world and drawing cartoons in them, which is super cool. And a crumpet for breakfast.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
What a way to start the day.
Yep.
Breakfast of champions.
Totally.
Favorite books?
So one I've been enjoying recently is Humankind, Ricka Bregman. There's a really beautiful kids book called, what is it called? It's by Oliver Jeffers.
Oh yeah. I'm with you. The Bottle.
Here We Are. Yeah, so it's a book he wrote for his firstborn kid, and it's kind of notes for living on planet Earth.
That's not the purple one, is it? With they build a house? No, don't worry, it's another one.
Another one, yeah. But a really, really beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful story.
all of his.
Yeah,
There's just a
profound.
Yep.
And those would be the ones that come to mind.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon.
Yeah.
It's a fun little read.
I know that name for some reason. Austin Kleon. 3 favourite smells.
3 favourite smells. Fresh baked cookies. And with a cup of coffee.
There it is.
Yeah. Although, I mean, coffee's a fascinating one because it doesn't actually really smell.
Really?
Yeah. So the process of making coffee kind of removes a lot of its smell. So it
Yeah.
actually tastes better if you drink it in a roastery because you can actually smell the coffee aroma better.
Wow.
So there's a little
Like
science fact for you. So go to your local roastery to
Yeah.
drink your coffee because it will taste better.
that. Wow.
Lavender, quite like lavender, and petrichor.
What is that?
It's a smell of rain on asphalt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's so distinctive, eh?
yeah.
I like that. What makes you laugh?
Random things, silly things, odd facts. The fact that pumpkin is a berry, so pumpkin soup is a berry smoothie.
You would be fun to have around, honestly. You would fit well with our team. Did everyone just look at you and go, where do you even get that from? First job.
First job, I had a paper route, but first proper job, I worked as a statistical analyst for my dad's company, but I worked as a clown.
Outstanding.
And it was a touring musician and like music teacher for a while. So a range of different things.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And which totally makes sense of it's all that momentum. Go to pick me up songs. That's going to be tough.
There is a live version of Mutiny by James Brown on the Arsenio Hall show.
Yeah.
Which is available on YouTube, and I recommend you check it out because it's one of the most powerfully funky things. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah.
I am not a little known fact, but you wouldn't know it about me, is I'm the most eclectic music lover ever. I just adore music, and my children, we have a nightly dance off at dinner time, like it's
nice. That's
music.
A great
Though I can't sing, I give it a good touch. Very passionate with my trying. 3 things that you're grateful for today.
It's hard just in the morning. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for being able to be here doing these kind of things. And I am grateful for being able to live doing the thing that I'm deeply passionate about.
Yeah, it makes work not work, doesn't it? When hobbies, this is good.
This is something my wife keeps telling me that I need to have.
Wow.
I don't really have specific hobbies.
Yeah.
Music is, it's not really a hobby, but it is a hobby, but it's also kind of work, but it's joy and fun and kind of all of the things. I do enjoy baking. I don't do it enough. And like the problem with baking as a hobby is that you end up with like heaps and heaps of sweet treats to eat, which is not great for like the other elements of health and well-being.
Just savor the moment, just enjoy it, don't worry about the next part.
But I'm reading books. But I don't have a particular kind of like, I do colouring.
It almost brings people stressed when we ask that question. They're like, hobbies, I don't really have anything. Yeah. I should take that out actually.
No, it's a great question because I think it's, what do you do for play is maybe an easier question.
Yeah. What activities bring you joy or something? Yeah. Right. Yeah. What does a recovery day look like for you? So what does a day off look like?
Movies on the couch with family. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That's a fun time. Often I walk to a cafe. But just the time that we get to have at home is a good time. Yeah.
Qualities you love about yourself.
Curiosity. I managed to kind of like perseverance, I think. I see one of the key things that I think I'm able to do quite well is to work as a translator.
Okay.
And so that's to be in a range of different situations and see where the dots join that often people can't see, but also that applies to the way that you can work in film or theatre to like see something and know how to support that musically.
Which comes down to your theatre stuff again of being like observant and seeing, that's one of when I did drama at high school, one of our things was to come and sit in Garden Place with Mrs. Catherine Ryan, if you know.
I know Catherine Ryan. Yeah.
First teacher that said she believed in me, and I got my first ever academic award from Mrs. Ryan when I was in 7th form. I love Catherine Ryan. She's great. Catherine Ryan. She's fantastic. Was we'd come and sit in Garden Place and people watch.
Nice.
And tell the story, so we'd watch someone if they looked sad, if they looked happy, if they were eating, if they were rushing, and we'd try and create the story of what was going on in her mind and why was she rushing, and or how did she get the food, or is she on a lunch break, is her mum sick, is she rushing to get it? It's a really, really interesting thing. Who is someone that has positively changed your life?
I mean, meeting my wife, and like we've been together now for 2008, so however many years that is.
I've been married for 12 and that was 2010, so 14 years.
14 years, thank you for that math. I think, like I mentioned before, the time spent with Richard Nuns, and how that's kind of manifested in a range of different ways. But yeah, I mean, there's all of the people that I have the joy to collaborate with. Every one of those opportunities is fulfilling and rewarding in some way.
Do you have any family traditions you do throughout the year?
Not anything big. We are big on the little things. So it's never really kind of like, I mean, there's always the kind of standard whatever Christmases and things, our birthdays, but they're not particular. It's more like the moments when we can kind of have cooked breakfast together and sitting around the table, and it's like little things rather than sort of big.
It's going to be one of my new favourite quotes ever. We're big on the little things.
Yeah.
Go hard on those small moments. Oh, that's so awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, because I'm just thriving. That
awesome.
is absolutely fantastic, Jeremy. Thank you so much for your time today.
An absolute pleasure.
I can't wait to hear your feedback on this, so let us know what you think, and then we can give that feedback to Jeremy, and we'll see you again soon. Ka kite.